client desires, therapist boundaries, erotic transference, explained Rory. I'm intrigued. What do we need to know here?
What we really need to know, Ken, is the question that was asked many years ago by a student who said to me quite directly, she was sat right in front of me in the circle, and she said, "Can I ask you a question?" I said, "Sure." "What happens if my client fancies me?" And what she was talking about was transference. Transference is unconscious or redirected feelings, desires from an important past relationship that are then projected on to the therapist. When you're offering those facilitative conditions, you're being empathic, you're being non-judgmental, you are really listening and paying attention to the client. What happens is that sometimes clients see that as a romantic gesture. And for some clients, they may have a wish fulfillment. They may think, my therapist's so lovely, I'd love to date them. And what happens is that clients can sometimes drift in to fantasizing about their therapist being the ideal date. And it can rock us a bit when a client says, "I'd love to go out with a man like you," or "I'd love to have a girlfriend like you." It can rock you, because how do you respond to that? And that's the real issue of erotic transference, that the client is coming for something else. They're not coming for therapy. They're coming to spend time with someone who they'd like to date, Ken.
Yes, it is that soil of a different kind where a person is truly listened to with empathy, and it's irrespective of modality. I know soil of a different kind relates to person-centered, but it really does span all of the different modalities. A person coming in, finally being heard. This person actually listens to me. This person actually really cares. And they're having changes happening within their life where this person, me being close to this person, is really beneficial for me, almost like a talisman, as opposed to seeing it as therapy where they are progressing. That is all shone onto the therapist. And that can be very seductive indeed. And it's understandable. I remember taking, I'll keep this very broad, this topic into my supervision, because I was shocked. I was deer in headlights. It was normalized instantly, which was very helpful for me by my supervisor, who said it's natural for humans that are in close contact, spending a lot of time together, to maybe form an attraction for that other person. There's naturalness in that. But I think this becomes the erotic transference when this person is projecting onto you the fix that they need, or seeing you not as the therapist, but as something else, as you have so beautifully said, Rory. And this is nothing new, is it? It goes back to Sigmund Freud. What do we learn from Sigmund Freud? Because he pointed this out to us, Rory.
Yes, he was the person who named erotic transference. He wrote about this, and he talked about this in the early 1900s. And he observed that some of his patients, as he called them, developed romantic or sexual feelings for him. He was the first person to identify it. And he did actually write observations on transference love. And he discussed patients' erotic feelings. And one of the things he came up with, or he believed, that it's not genuine love. So it's not love as we would know it, but it's rather a repetition of emotional patterns from childhood relationships. And now we are really moving into the psychodynamic realm, where a lot of therapists, and I'd include myself in that, would believe that when we look for a partner, what we are looking for is patterns of love that were given to us by our caregiver. There's this old story about people marrying the parents, but I do think there's some truth in that. I think that when we as humans look for partners, we're replaying what we enjoyed about being parented, maybe the love or the closeness, and then we build that into a different relationship, a different form of love with a romantic or a sexual partner. And Freud was very clear. He thought that they should not be gratified. So in other words, he thought they shouldn't be reciprocated, although Freud actually had an affair with one of his clients, so he wasn't the greatest role model for this. But he did think they should be understood as part of the therapeutic process. And I think that's exactly what your supervisor did. your supervisor, when you went and you were rattled by it, Ken, your supervisor helped you understand that sometimes erotic or eroticized transference is part of the therapeutic process. It happens more often than we'd like to believe, I think.
Yeah. And just following on from that, it's about recognizing that, and rather than running from it, is actually working with that erotic transference to, so very safely just exploring that. What is that with that person? Now, how do we do this gently, Rory? Because I know that we're treading on, there are certain modalities where this is very strong and it's taught, but there are also modalities where it isn't taught at all. You need to learn about it in CPD. How do we gently explore and work with erotic transference without reinforcing that or being complicit in that, Rory?
I think we need to be very gentle in our explorations. And I think that any exploration should always focus on meaning. So I may say to the client, I hear what you're saying. I just wonder what this means to you, and try to get them to explore what it is, maybe even name the feelings. And in that, you may very well start to uncover something that was either missing or not completed in a previous relationship. I think to run away from it, and we are talking to students specifically here, Ken, I think it is very difficult, and this is where you're going to need a bit more supervision. Don't shy away from it. Don't go into the shadows and hope it'll pass, because it probably won't pass. Even if the client doesn't talk about it, it'll still be there. So just gently explore it and ask, okay, you've said that you find me attractive. Can you just tell me maybe a little bit more about, maybe, is there someone in your past that I remind you of? And that's the key to unlocking transference, because transference is that time machine where someone is living a here and now relationship that is informed by the there and then. And they might say, oh, when I was at school, I had a boyfriend or a girlfriend who looked like you. You can help the client understand that was then and this is now. It's very tricky. And I think it's probably one of the most daunting explorations students can take, because students haven't got the history of practice behind them. It's one of those bridges one has to cross as a trainee therapist. Once you've crossed it, you'll cross it many times again. But when you do cross it, it won't be as scary, but very tricky for a student, Ken.
It is. And I enjoy having a rule set for tricky situations. There is a very clear boundaried rule set. It's around our boundaries and our ethics. It is never appropriate for a therapist to reciprocate or act on erotic transference. Never. So that is a real hard and fast rule that we can rest in. At least we know that. It may be tricky, but we have got that boundary. And look to your ethical body, and it will undoubtedly emphasize maintaining clear professional boundaries to protect both the client and the therapist. Those boundaries are put in right at the beginning of the relationship. And supervision, as you've said, Rory, it's the place to go. And you take your own reactions, which is what I was taking in to supervision. My supervisor said, and what came up in you? And explored what was happening within me. And of course, we train supervision in counselling tutor. Rory and I are both supervisors, and we know that countertransference is what may play out there, and that's what the supervisor is looking for. So the supervisor will look to you and how that made you feel, but also maybe help you around how you may manage that with your client.